So currently there are trade rumors going around of Odell Beckham Jr. And I just want to go over, a couple of the trade machines, I guess you could say. I don't know. I think what they're gonna do, the Cleveland Browns obviously, is they had a devastating loss, 38-6 to the Ravens. But remember, brand new coach, brand new coaching system. The only team with a new coach to even win for Week 1 was the Washington Football Team. The Panthers lost. The Patriots, not the Patriots. I'm sorry. The Giants lost. The Browns lost. It's not uncommon that when a new coach comes in and every single player on both sides of the ball have to relearn the offensive playbook and the defensive playbook, I guess, that they struggle in the first couple of weeks. Do I think that the Washington Football Team is going to make the playoffs? No, they're not going to make the playoffs. But do I think the Browns can make the playoffs? I do think the Browns can still turn it around. We're going into Cincinnati this week on Thursday primetime. So I think there's a lot that we can do. Obviously, we immediately cut Austin Seibert from the Browns, and Cody Parkey was brought up from the practice squad. Cody Parkey did have a good career. He's not like top 10 all time in 25 yards, field goals, extra points, and 50 plus. But he's average at everything. Austin Seibert is not good at anything. He is below average. Cody Parkey is average to above average in everything. That's why I think Cody Parkey is a better kicker for the Browns roster. He's a veteran. He knows what to do. Obviously, the big moment was the double doink. It's been 2 or 3 years. I think Cody Parkey does deserve a chance this week and probably for the next week or two just to get back in the swing of things. But we shouldn't be freaking out by trading Odell Beckham Jr. immediately after our loss to the Ravens. They are a Super Bowl contender. They will win the AFC North, and they will either be the 1 or the 2 seed in the AFC this year. We shouldn't be freaking out to the point of trading all of our good players. Now, let me say this. Odell has not worked with Baker. Baker needs 2 Jarvis Landrys. He does not need a Odell and a Jarvis Landry. See, Odell has the top 5 player mindsets. And he does have skill. He has skill when it gets a good team around him. When it gets when he's the pure number 1, he is the best option. He's going to be great. The Giants, he was great. The problem is the Cleveland Browns have 3 tight ends that can catch now because David Njoku came out of nowhere. Jarvis, Rashard Higgins are very good. 2 running backs. You got to choose where you put the ball. Odell needs to go somewhere where he is the number 1 outside threat. That's why with the Giants, he was good. He was the number 1 option on every play. They had to double Odell, which is good because that means that he is the clear and present threat. Now, I want to go over a couple of the trades that I've seen, and I guess just kind of breaking down why each team would do it. So the first team was the New England Patriots. Now, obviously, before Odell was traded to the Browns, the Patriots were heavily in there. Brady was trying to get Odell. Odell was trying to get to Brady. But obviously, the Giants didn't trade to the Patriots because they wanted to avoid a super team, obviously. Now that there's a year and a half, 2 years difference from when he was traded, I think this is the best time for the Patriots to get him. I don't know what it's going to take for them to actually get Odell Beckham Jr. I think what's going to take to get Odell to the Patriots is probably going to be Joe Thuney. Like, let's just be honest here. Joe Thuney is the right guard of the New England Patriots. He's on a franchise tag, hasn't signed a long-term contract yet. Joe Thuney is going to be a part of any Odell trade. I think it's going to have to be Joe Thuney in next year's first. I think that's going to be the best. Because honestly, listen, Stephon Diggs. Let me look this up real quick. Stephon Diggs trade. Let me get exactly what was traded for Stephon Diggs. Because obviously Odell is better than Stephon Diggs. So Buffalo sent a first rounder, a 5th rounder, a 6th rounder, and a 2021 4th round selection. That's a haul for Stephon Diggs. Odell is better than Stephon Diggs. So I think it's going to take a high caliber player and 1 first round pick or even a 2nd round pick. I think New England would be flexible with a future 2nd round pick. But I think New England is trying to keep this year's picks. Because if New England goes 5-11, 6-10, they could get a high caliber quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, for example. I think that's who they're trying to go for. I think because they have enough trade capital to trade up for Trevor Lawrence. And I think that is something that we actually need to talk about eventually in another video. That'll be another video. But Justin Fields, another example. I can't think of any other names. I'm sorry. There was a quarterback that was supposed to go in this year's draft, but I can't remember his name, from Georgia, I think. Anyway, Odell is better than Stephon, so I think he's going to take a high caliber player in a first or a second round pick. And I think New England is ballsy enough to throw in a second round pick or even a first round pick, and Cleveland maybe sends Odell and a future third and a future fifth. I think that's enough to get Odell for Joe Thuney in a first. If Cleveland also throws in two picks that are later in the rounds, and maybe even a this year fifth round pick, I just think you got to get a high New England pick for next year in Joe Thuney. That's my trade machine for the New England Patriots. Another team that I've been seeing a lot of people bring up is the San Francisco 49ers. Now, this is not a rumor that comes out of left field. San Francisco actually offered more than what the Browns paid to acquire OBJ from New York last season. But obviously, New York and the 49ers have had a very deep rival, especially because they're both in the NFC. But, they've had rivalry with each other for years at this point because they're supposed to be like arch nemesis or whatever. And San Francisco did a really bad job because obviously Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk they're either on IR or they're injured and questionable. And we know that they still need a wide receiver because Emmanuel Sanders they traded for last year and he immediately left. So I think if you can get Odell, who's under contract for 2 or 3 more years, $16 million a year, which is nowadays, below average pay for a top 10 receiver, I think they can do it. And that trade is probably going to be more of a defensive trade because they don't really have a lot of offensive weapons I think the Browns want. I think it'd probably be a Solomon Thomas and a 5th round pick for Odell Beckham Jr., and I'd be okay with that. If I could get Solomon Thomas and a 5th round pick for Odell Beckham Jr., gimme. Because Solomon Thomas, I believe, is under contract for multiple seasons at this point. Yeah, Solomon Thomas signed a 4-year, $28 million contract with San Francisco 49ers, an average salary of $7 million. You pay Solomon Thomas, a top-end defensive tackle, $7 million to be on your team. You have Sheldrick Richardson, Ogunjobi, Solomon Thomas, Olivier Vernon, and Myles Garrett. That is a lethal defensive line. Or you could trade for Quan Alexander. I think Quan Alexander is an interesting trade piece. The problem is that I don't think the 49ers would do it. I think Solomon Thomas, who's their 3rd or 4th D tackle, which is crazy that that's their 3rd or 4th D tackle, but I think Solomon Thomas in a very late pick can get Odell to the 49ers. So that's my trade machine for the San Francisco 49ers for Odell Beckham Jr. The Philadelphia Eagles. Man. Alshon Jeffrey. Apparently, they were trying to trade him before week 1, but it didn't happen. So he's already on the outs. They don't really have a receiver. They don't. I think this is interesting because you basically stay in the Midwest. I'm saying Philadelphia's part of the Midwest. They're technically part of the Northeast, whatever. You stay in the general location of Ohio. Still close to Jarvis. Still driving distance to see Jarvis, your best friend, which is still good. You're next to him instead of New York and Florida. I think this is probably one of them that I would actually agree with. If the Eagles could give me one of their defensive linemen, because they're not trading offensive talent. They are not trading anyone on the offense. There is a 100% chance no one on their offense is being moved from their offense. Maybe Zach Ertz. If you didn't sign Austin Hooper in the offseason, I would probably trade for Zach Ertz. But they are absolutely not going to trade for any part of their offensive line. They're not going to trade the offensive line. What I would try to get, though, is Fletcher Cox. Yes, he is old. I know he's old. But imagine that. Fletcher Cox and Sheldon Richardson. If you did Odell and a 4th round pick for Fletcher Cox and a future 3rd round pick, future 3rd round pick that is like it could go into a 4th round pick if the Eagles don't win this many games. Like you add some kind of protection onto it. So if we hit this requirement, it's a 4th round pick, not a 3rd round pick we give you. That would be perfect. Because I think the only way that the Eagles get Odell is if they trade Fletcher Cox or another D tackle. It can't be Javon Hargrove. They just signed him from the Steelers. Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat and Jannard Avery. Those 3, and again, Jannard Avery is a perfect example. They already have good rapport with each other. Sadly, that was with the John Dorsey administration, but Brandon Graham is okay. Vinny Curry's on IR. But Derek Barnett, Josh Sweat, and Jannard Avery and Fletcher Cox are the 4 that I would go for. Obviously, Fletcher Cox, if he's untouchable, I'd then go for Derek Barnett or Josh Sweat. I wouldn't trade back for Jannard Avery. Nothing against the dude, but I think the other two are more high caliber. I believe Derek Barnett was in. I believe Derek Barnett was in the 2017. I believe Derek Barnett was in the 2017 draft. Yeah, Derek Barnett signed a 4-year, $12 million contract with an annual salary of $3.2 million. So I think Derek Barnett would be interesting at the defensive end that could give depth behind Olivier Vernon, but I don't think it improves anything. I think Derek Barnett and Olivier Vernon are about the same level. Fletcher Cox, though, is what I would go for. So for the Philadelphia Eagles, the trade machine I would do for Odell Beckham is Fletcher Cox in a future third with a protection that, let's say Fletcher Cox gets this many sacks or plays this many games, it becomes a third-round pick, but to give you a fourth-round pick, you actually trade with protection to move up to a third-round pick. And the Browns then send Odell in a this-year fourth-round pick. That's my trade machine for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Green Bay Packers. Now, Devontae Adams is obviously a star. He's a top receiver. He's paid and he acts like a top receiver. He had 14 passes for 156 yards in Week 1 against the Vikings. Imagine Odell next to that. That would be insane. Now, obviously, Brian Gutekunst, right? Is that his name? Brian Goody? Yeah, there it is. Goody, that's his name. Yeah, Goody, obviously, he muffed up the draft. You know, he did. He should have drafted a wide receiver. He didn't. What I would do for the Green Bay Packers is as follows. If I was the Green Bay Packers, all right, here's the problem. You don't have any big tradable assets besides the Smith duo, but I don't think you want to break them up. Christian Kirksey obviously just came from the Browns, so we're not going to trade for him. Dean Lowry, I don't think is good enough. Kenny Clark just got paid. He's staying there for a long time. I don't know what they could trade. There's nothing they could trade to the Browns to get Odell Beckham Jr. I don't see it. Unless you're willing to give up maybe, just maybe, Kevin King, the cornerback, and we'll throw in Odell, Terrence Mitchell in a 7th, and you throw us Kevin King a 2nd and a 5th. Obviously a future 5th. It's hard though. It's very hard to find a good trade for the Packers. Probably just be a whole bunch of picks. Probably just like a 1st, a 5th, a 3rd, and a future 4th for Odell and like a 6th. I think it's gonna be a whole bunch of picks for the Green Bay Packers. They just don't have a roster for them to trade. You know, they just don't have tradable assets. And that is all that I genuinely believe could trade for Odell. Another team that I'm interested in is the Bears. Like, no one is talking about that. I find it very interesting. I think the Bears are in play for Odell. I think if they genuinely all sat down and Ryan Pace said, let's give an offer. Here's what I would do for Odell. Allen Robinson. Trade Allen Robinson. No one on defense goes because they don't have a good enough defensive depth to trade a starter or someone. You trade Allen Robinson, get Odell back, and then once you do that, you throw in Allen Robinson and maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick for Odell. That's it. I don't know why no one's talking about the Chicago Bears, but that's my personal favorite trade machine. No one's talking about it, and it upsets me very much because I feel like I'm stupid, but I'm not. I feel like AR in a 1st and like in a 5th. That's the trade I'll do. I do Allen Robinson, 2022 first. I'd go an extra year. I'd go 2 years ahead. 2022 first and a 5th this year. I think that's enough to get the Browns. Because that means the Bears are going to be past Mitchell Trubisky or with a now paid Mitchell Trubisky. I don't know. I think it's a good idea. I think it is. I think the Bears would do it in a heartbeat if they asked for Allen Robinson and a couple picks. Because Allen Robinson, as we know today, just asked for a trade or is trade rumors because he wants a contract extension, but the Bears aren't doing it. Anyway, those are what that's what I'm gonna end it at. You know, if that's 4 or 5 teams, I think if OBJ is traded, which I don't think he will, and if they do trade him, wait a couple more weeks. Wait till week 5 or 6. Let Odell, Baker, Jarvis, and the offense in Stefanski's system as long as possible. Go 4 or 5 weeks in. And then if he still isn't producing, if he's still having 3 catches for 50 yards and 4 drops, then you can trade him. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more sports takes by me, drop a like, comment, subscribe. What should you say? Comment OBJ poop in the poop emoji. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Peace.